Sooners of Oklahoma at 12-0 and still looking for respect nationwide.
What is going on, Sooner Nation? Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Barry and Mack Show. As always, myself, Barry, personal trainer, sports performance coach out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And alongside me, former Sooner wide receiver, 2000 national champ, Mr. Damian Mackey. How are we doing tonight, D Mack?
B, what's going on, man? I just fought traffic for 2 hours. Went to the North Crowley versus Dunk game. State semifinal. Amazing game. Probably the best collection of talent I've ever seen at a high school football game. The quarterback at Duncanville is amazing. Corey Moore, whatever his name is, number one, the wide receiver at Dunk is amazing. The quarterback at North Crowley was not undone. He came to play. 4'5" type guy, D1 kid. Crowley has a kid number 6 going to Colorado to play for Dion. 5'9", 165, but is a water bug. Dude is legit. Dunk has a couple D linemen that are just out of this world. Number 10 and number 11 were phenomenal players. Sideline access. It was fun. You know, I got asked, I saw about 3 or 4 coaches from the Metro, and like, Mackey, when you coming back? I said, hey, man, let me do a couple more years as an entrepreneur, and then I'll be back coaching for sure. It definitely fired me up to get back coaching. And so a couple more years in the entrepreneur space. I'll go visit Hype in Tennessee, see what he has to offer. I'll go visit some buddies. I got a couple buddies at Ole Miss, see what they have to offer. Talk to my buddies in the Dallas Metro, and then you'll see Mackey back coaching for sure. 2 more years. Give me 2 more years, and then we'll definitely be back in the game. But beautiful game. Crowley won. They sent Duncanville home, and very proud moment. My buddy cried, man. Cried tears of joy. I said, hey, bro, ain't time to cry yet. You got another game. You got another damn game to win, bro. You got to beat Westlake or whoever they got to beat. So it was really cool to see that. It was a good experience.
Awesome, man. Well, before we get started, want to remind everybody the show is brought to you by OU Insider, OUinsider.com. Go get yourself a membership. But D-Mac, sad news coming out this morning. Just want to highlight this at the top of the show. Former Sooner, and I'll let you speak on it. He's your teammate, right? Jimmy Wilkerson. Passed away, I guess, relatively unexpectedly. I don't know the insides outs, what happened. I'm sure you might have some more info on that. But I'm just going to let you speak on it, man.
Yeah, I got a text message last night. We have a pretty close-knit group, even, 20, 25 years later. There's just a lot of the older guys, Bob's inaugural seasons. Heard from JD, heard from El Mitch, some of the other guys. Jimmy passed away of a heart attack. His son literally played in the state championship game today. His wife sent us a message saying that Jimmy would have wanted to play in the game. And so he plays. I don't know if they won the game. I know God was with them, so hopefully things worked out for them. Jimmy was going to be a coach for JD. JD's a high school coach in the Metro, in Oklahoma City Metro somewhere.
Yep.
And Jimmy was planning on joining his staff. So they have been spending a lot of time together. JD's a guy who I've kept in close touch with over the years. He was always like a little bro, right? There's 3 or 4 from every class that you really stay tight with. Another one, and but that's a story we'll say a little bit later, but T. Choice, who's now, of course, the ops. T. Choice is the RB coach at Texas. He's a guy who we stay in touch. And he said, hey, D-Mac, I'm going to get you an interview with Sark. I said, nah, bro, there's one job in America I could never take. I could never imagine wearing burnt orange and throwing up that little uterus that they throw up.
Oh, my God.
But anyway, Jimmy passed, man, and obviously leaves behind a family that is very near and dear to us as Sooners. His wife has been very, since, they've been connected. And especially since he got back into the city, and his sons were going through high school at Carl Albert and doing what they were doing, you just value life, you value family. I think about my children and our health. The word is he had a heart attack. And so whatever that meant in terms of any type of health concerns or, any type of conditions that he may have had, I just know that we're carnal beings, man. And at any moment, there's no guarantee tomorrow is not offered. And so when God says it's time to go home, that's that. And for our brother, man, his memory lives through us. Obviously, for his children, the same goes in that regard. Jimmy was an amazing team player when he came in as a linebacker. By the way, a good linebacker. Jimmy was a good linebacker. Jimmy went down into a three-point stance because we needed more athleticism at the edge position. And so he was an undersized DN his redshirt freshman year when we played against Florida State. And obviously, he continued to grow, blossom, and develop into an NFL dude.
Well, I want you to talk about that because, we'll do this kind of real quick, but his ability, his athleticism is honestly kind of what was a perfect match and what married him to have a great career in the NFL was because he was, as the game was changing a little bit, he was an athletic edge player who could just do some things, right, and did a lot for you guys in very big games.
Jimmy played well. National championship, he was a menace. Big 12 championship, he was a menace. That A&M game, Jimmy's a guy who 2000 season. Jimmy's a guy who made plays for us when it mattered, and so Jimmy was a thumper at backer. He was not going to be the best athlete at the linebacker position. By the way, he was not a bad athlete, but Torrance Marshall's a 4.4 guy. Rocky Kalmus is cerebral and intelligent and quick as they come, cat quick. Jimmy was gonna play behind Teddy, right? Teddy's a guy coming in with Jimmy. It allowed us to get more talent on the field, and Jimmy's long, and he got longer. He started gaining more weight. He was probably 228, 230 his redshirt freshman year, right? The year we won the Natty, he's probably our weak side end, weighing 230, 6'2.5", 230, but obviously continued to mature, grow, develop. And like I said, when it was all said and done, had a healthy NFL career, started a family, obviously had some children, and we'll always remember, what he meant to us as a teammate, as a man, and then also as a man of faith.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of sad news to put a damper on what for OU has not been a horrible day, D-Mac, and we'll transition the best we can. It's so hard to come out of discussing something like that. But as we're seeing in the chat, OU did get a commitment today in the transfer portal, a big one that they tried to get last year, right? But before that, I think the more important one is keeping who you got. OU has been in a spot so far this offseason. We have heard the hubbubaloo. I'm sure we'll talk about it. I want to get your take on some of the stuff I discussed in the video I posted that went out there. But OU gets a recommitment from Deion Burks, who is staying at Oklahoma. He's going to be rocking the number 4 this upcoming season. As Venable said, that number 6, that's just a hard number to wear at OU, at this point going forward. That's a rough one, man. But OU gets the commitment from Deion Burks. D-Mac, we really didn't get to see everything he was capable of this year. He is a player who, if he went out this year, somebody is going to draft him. He would be a late round guy, most likely, but a team will see enough from him from pro day, possibly from a combine. I don't know if he gets the invite, but either way, a team would absolutely take a chance on him, and he probably makes a roster now. So how valuable is it to have a guy like that coming back, recommitting to the staff? And then the number switch is always interesting. So talk about it.
We alluded to the fact that in our last pod, listen, I mean, it's out there now. We pretty much knew Andrell Anthony and Nick Anderson were going to part ways with the university. By the way, I think I have some permission to give away some more inside information that I am privy to. They're not Sooners anymore, so I'll go into a little bit more details about some of the things we know about those two. I'm surprised Farouk made a decision to leave. To me, he's a guy that could have been a huge value add. I wasn't expecting. I was hoping he'd stick around. My goal, my hope was that Gibson would come back. Guys, Gibson going into fall camp was the number one outside receiver. It was not Nick Anderson. And if people go back and listen to our podcast in fall camp, I say that. And then, of course, the very next practice or the next week, he tears his ACL. But Gibson was the one. At the end of the season, last season, Gibson was their most preferred premium player. Nick Anderson had a better totality of a season last year, and he and JFA had shown a lot of chemistry through the Tulsa game where they had some big plays, and obviously BYU and some other places. But by the end of the year, Gibson was the guy. And so obviously having both of them is an embarrassment of riches. But I knew, and Gibson's the guy who was told to me firsthand was the heartbeat of the room. He was the toughest guy. He was the guy who always was the one telling the guys, come on, let's go get it, right? Not to say anything negative about the other guys, but Burks was a newer guy. Farouk, that just wasn't his personality. That's not Nick Anderson's personality. And so I thought it was going to be huge to be able to keep Gibson. Burks showed us enough. And if you watch the spring game film, you see the explosion pop off. You know, if he had opportunities to get the ball in space, the kid can do something with the rock. We just had an anemic offense. We had a cancer. The offense was a cesspool of leukemia, you know, and so he never got the opportunities. But I thought Farouk at the Z, Burks at the H, and then Gibson at the X with the young pups who played a ton. People discount Raggins and Kearney and Carry-On. Those guys played a ton. The SEC is not going to be some mythical, surprise to them going into next season. They've got some things to prove. That's 100%. But they're going to line up and say, okay, I did this last year. I lined up against Bama. I lined up against Auburn. I lined up against LSU. And they're going to be bigger, stronger, faster, more comfortable in who they are as young men. And the most development you get in college football is between your freshman and sophomore year. And so I expect those guys, Raggins to be a speed guy, Kearney to be a Z over the middle, in cut, out cut guy who can do a lot of things. And then Kearney, obviously a backup at X, without thinking about what we're going to get in the portal, which we got to backfill that probably with another X type guy and then another H type guy. We probably need minimally 2 receivers. I fully expect our freshmen to come back next year and be better players in a better system with a better quarterback. And so having Burks back, Barry, I think it's a big deal. He's a guy that if we simply make an adjustment from running tight end sweeps to slot sweeps and tight end screens to slot screens, right? And tight end throwbacks to slot throwbacks and tight end double passes to slot double passes, we're automatically going to get some goods out of a player like him because he's a guy who's dangerous with the ball in his hands. He's a guy that may garner a double or a backer or bracket and can get some one-on-one stuff to the outside receivers on the edges. So very happy about that. I don't want to overblow it, but with all the guys leaving, right, I think it is important to say that in my opinion, 2 of the very best out of the 3 are guys that are sticking around.
Yeah, and OU, I mean, this is huge tonight. I mean, OU getting a commitment from Jaron Bradley, who by way of Texas Tech, by way of Boston College, 6'5", in the 215, 220 range as far as weight. He is a big, long receiver. D-Mac, in his inaugural year at Tech, he went, I want to say somewhere 70 catches, almost 800 yards, and had himself a game against Oklahoma, right, where he hauled in over 100 yards. And he's a guy who maybe comes in and, possibly gives you depth at X. Maybe he's a guy you can flex in some different spots. But he is a polished receiver who adds some OU has been able to bring in guys who are just kind of just possession players, right? Andrell Anthony never got to fully have his speed and talents realized with what he could do on the field. He was just kind of a guy. Yet you wonder with OU getting a guy like Bradley, who is more akin to the level of player that Trey Harris was, who went to Ole Miss. He's more closer to that level as a receiver. and he's got some skin in the game. He's had game-winning catches. He's a guy who's had 100-yard games, hauling in multiple touchdowns in the games. Can a player like that provide some depth? I'm trying to remember the details, but I know OU wanted him a year ago, right?
Yep.
He was a guy who OU was after. Talk about what it takes and what you're hearing right now, because I think fans are a little hesitant, right, to get too excited because there's fear about what OU is offering in the NIL, right? I think that's just obvious. Is OU measuring up, right? And I would say Bradley is at the top of the list in terms of the type of player who would garner money. He's got more value, I would argue, than an Andrell Anthony and what he's going to garner, right? He just doesn't have the big school, the big, top 10, top 15 program next to his name. It's a Texas Tech and a Boston College, but he's still been a Power 5 guy. Talk about what you see Oklahoma doing and the sizable amount of resources, let's put it that way, that has to go to get a guy like that. Is OU throwing up competitive numbers and doing everything they can under BV and the staff?
Let me ask a clarifying question. Is he confirmed or is he rumored? Because I literally just got back in the door.
Everybody hit us with it, but I feel like he is. Let's double check. I feel like he is confirmed.
I just want to make sure because I do want to talk about the portal. I've had some really interesting offline conversations with people who there's a strategy behind the portal. Had some conversations with some of the Tennessee brass when I was in Rocky Top, and then had an opportunity to have conversation with people that are directly connected to our just the portal, the contingency, the income. And we're gonna have a guest next week come and tell some firsthand information, tell some firsthand stories, specifically some players that we have been in the battles in the portal and dealing with recruiting and what it looks like in the landscape today, because I think that's really important. But if we have him, I'll say it for now because I'm not certain.
Yeah. Let's say this. Let's say OU is very much in the thick of it. There's some different reports out there as far as how confirmed it is. It doesn't look like he's put anything out there, but we shall see.
Okay. Well, assuming we have him, and if we do, that's a big deal. First things first, he cooked us. Go back and watch the film. Billy Bowman's wearing 5. He cooked us. I think we won that game at Tech 2 years ago. But the guy's going to give us size. Think JJ Hester with more meat and potatoes. Right? He's a guy who can beat you deep. He's got strong hands. He's a veteran. And he's been around the block. I think he kind of gives me the vibes of someone who's going to be no nonsense. He's coming here to handle business. I think he sees this as his last opportunity to put himself in position to play and not have to be a UDFA or 6th round, 7th round type player. OU is the type of place where if he has one big year, he can be a 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounder, which is where you're going to make the 7 figures and have the ability to make teams 2-3 years with some guarantees. But here's the thing. OU needs cachet, right? I'm looking at the comments. Guys, let me tell you something about the season and the era we are in. College sports, cachet matters. I had an opportunity to talk to the North Crowley coach for him. He's a good friend of mine. We coached together at Cedar Hill. He's now the head coach at North Crowley. The fact of the matter is, and I posted this in our OU Insiders. If you're on OU Insiders, you guys saw my post where I said perception is now reality, right? And I'll go into more details about that. But the perception at Texas is that where you go to play for championships, to play in the playoffs, to have guys, going into the NFL. And the very interesting thing is just 2 years ago, that was not the case. And just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, OU was a place where if you were on offense, especially a skill guy, there was a decade of data that says offensive skill guys at the University of Oklahoma are NFL good. And, we've literally, it's been 3 years. It's what it's been. And that whole narrative has flipped on its head. And, I'm talking to Coach Gates, and he's like, Mack, I got to tell you, OU ain't going to be able to compete. everybody wants to go to Texas. And not only do they have the in-state advantage where the Texas boys now want to stay home, the Texas boys now want to portal back. But Sark is kind of having this reputation like Link had, where he's a quarterback whisperer. And now a lot of quarterbacks are saying, hey, Texas is a place to go. And so I look at that and, right, it is what it is. But to me, that just smells like opportunity. And if I know Texas, my rebuttal to him was like, hey, bro, I said, I can't think of any time that I was at OU or any time afterwards where they didn't, quote unquote, have more dudes, have more talent, have more stars, have more blue chips, have whatever you want to call them. We have more nuts. We had gorilla nuts. They had chimpanzee nuts. We had gorilla nuts. And when we saw they ass second Saturday in October, nuts hang. And theirs did it. And so what that means for us is we have to be, as it relates to this portal season, let's just assume we have $20 million. Right. Let's assume we have $20 million and you're going to take about 40% of that to get your top 4 to 5 guys. That's the reality of the portal, right? It's essentially, if you have a salary cap, let's say our cap is 20 million, you're going to take, it's probably 5 to 7 million of that and say, we got to secure our quarterback. We've got to secure somebody to go get the quarterback. We got to secure somebody to protect the quarterback. We got to secure somebody who can score touchdowns running the ball, secure somebody who can score touchdowns catching the ball. That's like 5 guys where 25 to 40% of your portal money is going to creating those. The term that I've heard thrown around are program guys. Program guys, and this is the way, guys, we got to start looking at the portal like this. Program guys are people you identify that are going to be with you for the next 3 to 5 years. And it's only 3 to 5 because in 3 years, those guys are typically the best players on the team. If the opportunity presents itself, those guys are going to play on Sunday. Program guys. The second tier guys are guys who are never going to garner, let's just say, over 50 to 100K, right? So these are now like the glue guys, the plug guys, right? And you want to have a healthy number of, 20 to 40, right? It's your starting guards. It's your not superstar backer. It's your not superstar DBs. But these are guys that have a level of commitment, a level of discipline, and they see the vision. And these are also guys who are just grateful and thankful to say, hey, man, I'm getting 50K or 60K or 80K, right? Whatever that number is. But that number deducts from the bottom line of your 20 million. By the way, that number might be another $7 to $10 million between all of your guys. Okay. Yeah. And then it leaves you with wiggle room at OU, right? What's a huge area of need this year, right? We absolutely need receivers. So maybe we spend a little bit more on receivers. Obviously the quarterback position, but you're still allocating $2 to $3 million in that way anyway. So that one's out of the equation, but it's like, we might need a star receiver. Daddy Stutzman's just graduated. We might pay a little more for another backer, right? The DB position, our best guy's a true freshman. He's 5'9". We might have to go pay $750 to get a DB that is going to garner the level of cachet that we're seeking. Because again, perception is reality. And so when I look at us, and excuse me, I just ran home and had a couple slices of pizza. When I look at this cycle and what we need to do, let me tell you what we don't need to do. And let me tell you what I see a ton of people saying on OU Insider and Rivals and on Twitter. We do not need to rush and go buy the best 6 guys that are in the portal today. For everybody who's saying the sky is falling because we didn't get, I like the tackle from Rice, right? Yeah. But there's 12 teams in the playoffs that have guys, I promise you, either 1A starters who want more or disgruntled or don't have a relationship with the coaches. They're going to go into the portal. I like some of the tight ends, right? The receiver position. Guys, there's going to be a ton of receivers that are playing the next couple of Saturdays that are going to want an opportunity. And we talked about this when you and I were on Rivals a few years ago before we left for a couple of years and came back. Yeah. OU is a destination. Let's just say I get recruited by UGA. I'm a top player in the country. Let's just say I get recruited by Texas. I'm at Duncanville. Texas has built a pipeline with Duncanville. They're building a pipeline with Crowley now. Freaking pisses me off. That's why I told Gates, I'm coming to coach at Crowley because I'm going to get the kids. I'm going to start making sure we got some kids coming our way. Yeah. But let's just say you recruit a guy and he goes to Texas. And while at Texas, He's good enough to be in the mix, but is not a guy who is getting a ton of reps. And they go to the playoffs, and we go to the playoffs. And at the end of the playoff season, we have an opportunity. Those guys do not want to go from Georgia to Baylor.
Yeah.
Those guys don't want to go from Bama to Wazoo. Even right. So if the money is anywhere near, OU has always been. By the way, fans, we have to admit there's been a lot of guys where if they didn't get a chance to do Ohio State or something happened, or Georgia or Bama, OU is a place where we can say, hey, this interlocked OU brand is going to merit you an opportunity to come here and still play for ships and still have national acclaim and attention and still have the history, pedigree, right? All that stuff has to be available. We, Coach Venables, I'm talking to you, Coach. We just have to take advantage of it this year. This year is a make or break year for our identity, for our future, for the perception of recruits, families, and the national media. This is it. This is the make or break year. And we have to embrace it. We have to. I would feel good if guys said it. We should declare it. We should vocalize it. Hey, you know what? We understand when you play at a school like OU, the expectations are this, and we're going to do this for Coach V. I promise you guys, this is going to be our attitude the 2025 season. If I were on that team, and I know myself, and for those of you that are old enough to know, Bob gave me, from my redshirt freshman year till I got injured, I was pretty much always interviewed because he knew I would give them enough, but not tell them everything.
Yeah.
I could articulate what I need to say without, you know what I mean? So I always was in the Tuesday Santee Lounge, media day. I always got invited. If I were on the team, it would be important to me to say at the very first media day, 2025 season, OU understands what's at stake. Coach, we got your back. SEC, we coming. Bet that. Like I would, if I felt like we had the goods, I would say that. And I hope there's someone on the team that feels they have the goods. They need to say that.
Yeah, I don't think there has been, especially this past year, it just felt like they were going into everything with the mentality of just trying not to be awful, right? And it sounds crazy, but like the difference between going into a competition or going into a lift or going into whatever it is, like knowing and having the confidence you're going to succeed versus going in thinking, man, I hope we can just like complete a couple forward passes today. Like that is a different mindset that, you're right, is not leaking out into the media. That is not the perception of Oklahoma right now. It's going to take Deion Burks is a great example. It's going to take a Deion Burks, a Jaden Gibson, who does seem to be that guy. It'll be curious to see his rehab, how he progresses, how he gets stronger. Because I will say this, some guys come back from ACL procedures. If they did everything right, guys, some guys come back from ACL and they're ready to go this day and age. There you go. You're a great example. And that was 22, 23 years ago.
The 1900s. It was in the 1900s.
It was in the 1900s, the 20th century. So I mean, it can be done. Jaden Gibson seems like a guy who's, from what has been said and that I've heard, and I'm sure that like he's bought in and he's doing things the right way. Before we dive into a little more of this transfer portal stuff, D-Mac, I do want to get your thoughts, get your take on some of the medical stuff. So a little while back, Gabe and Teddy did a podcast and they gave both sides of the coin. So they talked about Nick Anderson's view. It was really wrapped around Nick Anderson. They were very candid with his perspective, and they talked about the OU side, or the OU perspective. And I voiced it from a side that I know people hear my take and they go, man, he is like a little too pro player. He's not from what I do, it just biases me to kind of always side, not always, but I tend to side with the athlete because it's just kind of the way I'm now ingrained. It's my perception is to try and view it from their perspective because I'm trying to be a conduit for their success. And I will say this, I have, to speak candidly, talked to parents of players, and I've had discussions offline, I will say that, where I think it's one of those things where the truth is always kind of in the middle, right? It's probably a little bit of this, it's probably a little bit of that. It's probably the little player, little bit of the program, little bit of the staff. And obviously if it's happening to you, then the sky is falling and it's the worst thing ever. So I want to get your take on that, DMAC, from a guy who, was in a program, did go through rehab, did the whole thing with Scott Anderson, who was great at his job. And they had other people on the staff who were phenomenal, right? You know what that looks like. So just give your honest assessment on kind of what came out from Gabe's mouth, but then just the general aura that is surrounding Oklahoma and the perception, because the perception matters. So it doesn't matter what the reality is. The perception is that OU is not a player-friendly environment for injury. You have to fix that. So talk about it.
I think, and by the way, guys, I'm going to speak tonight based upon facts. I don't like to speak on innuendo, rumor. I mean, rumors are, people are going to tell you their interpretations, but I'm going to speak on things that were told to me firsthand. So here's the most important thing to say, Barry, and I think this, people can take it how they want to take it, but this is fact. Two of the people who had very egregious medical experiences from that whole ecosystem, whether it be the doctors themselves, the training staff. You and I talked offline about like how the logistics and training work. We'll kind of dive into that a little bit. The parents, the strength staff, right? There are two players that had honest and real injuries, where all of those people that I just spoke to, we'll call them stakeholders, were involved directly or indirectly. It was not a perfect experience. I'm not going to push blame any direction. Okay. It was not a perfect experience. They had serious injuries that they needed surgery. They needed rehab. They needed to slowly integrate into some strength and conditioning. And then they needed to get their body back prepared to play ball. You ready for this? They're both still Sooners. I think that's the part that really needs to be driven home. I don't want to say the players' names. You guys can probably decipher who they are. It doesn't take a genius to understand. There are two players who had season-ending injuries this year. Season-ending. Okay? They're still Sooners. The entire ecosystem was not perfect. I'm not blaming, was it this person, was it that person? That's not for me to say. What was very interesting for me to really, really understand as I'm hearing what's happening is they had a conscious decision and they said, I want to stay Sooners. Mm-hmm. They didn't blame the doctor. They didn't blame the head of training staff. They didn't blame the tech or the person who's day-to-day giving them ice, giving them stems, stretch like this. They didn't blame the rehab individual who is the one who specializes in how to open up your hips and get all your, whether it's your extension or your flexion, all the terms, that stuff, right? When you have an injury and you create scar tissue and you're trying to get full range of motion, it's a shoulder, it's a knee, it's a hip, right? And whatever it is, guys, there's two Sooners, two starters. I'll take it even a little deeper. You guys can figure this out. They don't play offense. They don't play receiver. Two guys, season-ending injuries, who had to depend on our medical staff, our training staff, our strength staff. The situation was not perfect. They're still Sooners. Mm-hmm. So hold that piece of information. Obviously, we've had a couple of receivers go into the portal. Obviously, most of us have heard Gabe and Teddy's pods. They had two different versions. By the way, salute to Gabe and Teddy. We got to do some type of partnership with them. They're the best. Those guys are killing it. Do y'all really believe that it was so bad that a kid had to drive to Edmond because he had no other option? When I first heard that, I was like, no freaking way. I was like, there's literally no freaking way. By the way, guys, I'm gonna tell you guys facts. So because when I heard that, I was like, hell nah. Guys, if you know my story, I came to OU on a tour ACL. I literally started my OU career in the training room with Scott Anderson. There's a funny story behind that. Today's not the day for that story. I'll tell the story another day. When Scott retired, we laughed because essentially Scott tried to run me off. They tried to run me off because I went to Hawaii 2 weeks before I got to OU, and I jumped off a cliff into the water, and I messed up my knee. So imagine I tear my knee up in December. It's August when I'm reporting, and my knee is still swelling. They're like, why the hell is your knee swelling 8 months later? I didn't have the heart to tell them, hey, I was in Hawaii 2 weeks ago and jumped off a cliff and misjudged hand landing, and I landed on the sand. The water had gone out, and I missed it. Neither here or there. I started OU in the training room. You guys know my career. I played 2 years. I caught 55 balls. I caught 5 touchdowns as a freshman and a sophomore. The second game of my junior season, my career ends before I could ever really mature into who I thought I could be down the road. Yes, people are guessing. There you go. So we got some smart folks.
There you go, man.
We got some smart people. Okay.
You don't need me to say it.
Right? Okay, all that happens. With all due respect, I saw the training scenario from start to finish. From the doctors to the neurologists to the MRIs to the CAT scans I did all of it, guys. I did all of it, and I did it 25 years ago. It's only improved. And because of that, I had intimate relationships with all the people in that room. And because of that, when I heard that podcast, I had to text people. I had to, because that's egregious. By the way, I believed it. When Gabe and Teddy said, hey, this is what's going on, I believed it. I was like, that's not the OU I went to, but damn, they wouldn't say that if it wasn't the truth. Granted, again, I want to give my teammates respect. They said this is from the context of these individuals, right? So you're talking about what Nick said happened, okay? All right. Well, shit, I hear you. Let me go see what I can uncover. Totally different tune to that conversation. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you what the NCAA allows college football players to do now. They have autonomy, okay? The coaches cannot force you to go to any doctor that the school wants you to. They cannot force you. The coaches cannot force you to do rehab in any way, shape, fashion, or form. The families have autonomy and a choice to do what they feel is best for their student athlete. And by the way, that's a good thing, right? In some instances, that's a good thing. And it 100%. Seems to me that the way the story was told, that autonomy was being perverted to a choice where they were saying that they didn't have it, when in reality, they were exercising it. They were exercising autonomy. Now, you and I talked about that. I think bare minimum, the idea of trust, right, is important. But here's what the person I spoke to today, who was directly related to all of this. By the way, this is not I'm not an insider. I'm just an alumni. And damn it, I talk to people. I have relationships. I'm an alumni. So there it is. I don't like to be thought of as an insider. That's not really the angle, or I'm an analysis. I want to analyze our team, analyze our culture, analyze the games. That's what I like to do. But flat out, what was flat out said to me? I said, gosh, dang, that's very logical. Every injury, and again, I'm not trying to piss on the kid, but every injury Nick Anderson had was a soft tissue injury. They were all soft tissue injuries. He never had a broken this or a torn that, right? I mean, obviously the rumor is by the end of this last thing where it was a misdiagnosis, no MRI taken, and it had torn off the bone. So I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is that the genesis of the injury was a soft tissue injury. And his brother kind of had him too. By the way, I heard they had another brother. I didn't know there was another brother. And I heard the other brother. And I heard there's another brother who also had soft tissue injuries too. So to me, right, you're passing the blame and the buck on some type of history. And again, I'm just telling you information that I didn't even know they had another brother. There's another brother. And so all I say that to say is, guys, to hear such damning, I'm going to call them excuses, whatever. I'm allowed to say what the hell I want to say. To hear such damning excuses about our medical staff. By the way, I believed them. And then to just hear that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of all of it. I think the thing that really just resonated for me is I didn't have to say names. 2 guys who are not receivers. And so I'll be candid, Barry. I know I'm kind of speaking in code, but I'll be candid. I said, hey, bro, I got to ask you this question. This is a question I asked today. This is a conversation I had today. I said, are either of those guys cancers? Is Nick Anderson and or Andrew Anthony, are they cancers? Are they the kind of guys that they not only do they make the excuse, but they start to blame, complain, and destroy? Well, that's a
100%.
term. That's a term you use, right? It's called BCD: blame, complain, destroy. And the very honest answer I got from that was no, but they're kind of soft, and they make and they make excuses. Again, I'm not going to get into the kid's business, but there's a story I heard about Anthony, I said, whoa, what? He did what? What did he do?
Yeah.
And I'm listen, I'm not going to say it because it's really bad.
Yeah.
It's really.
Oh my gosh.
But I think it helps shape context around the conversation, and I'm not making excuses for the damn program. Yeah. I heard there were some mistakes made. That's what I did here. But you also got to understand, somebody said it, and there's a little validity in the fact that if one guy gets hurt, he makes excuses. Another guy gets hurt, he's kind of soft, right? Another guy gets hurt, and he's been around the block through a lot of transition. And gosh dang, I wish we keep Farouk, but whatever, right? I don't know where that, from all intents and purposes, I've heard Farouk's a dog. That's everybody. Oh man, he's a dog. Kid comes to work. But that right mixture, it creates opportunities for people to find excuses to validate their own beliefs and thinks and thought processes and demonize someone else's. And so what I was told is, I don't think in any individual instance we're talking about a cancer or an overly just evil dude, but we are talking about some guys who are soft, some guys who make excuses. By the way, a guy who, from him and his brother, and of course, and there's another brother, which again I didn't know until this conversation, there have been a history of soft tissue issue of injuries, and somebody's got to be the blame. And so here's how I look at it, Barry. If OU didn't work for you, I think it's best that you bounce. I'm cool with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, but do me this favor. If you're going to go on your platform, if you're going to say what you got to say, and you're going to say your side, damn it, I get to say my side. And I'm not going to just blow smoke into the wind. I'm going to go do some research. I happen to know some people in all angles and aspects of what's happening with my university. It means a lot to me. And I'm not going to let you lambast BV and act like, you know, he wasn't taking care of his players. I'm not going to let you lambast. By the way, you know who didn't come up at all in all of this? And they've been kind of whispers that they were included in some capacity. There was no conversation about strength and conditioning. Somebody needs to come out and very clearly say, like, because when that whole thing's, oh, is it Schmitty and he's working him too hard? I need to make it very clear that the individuals I spoke to, in 0 instances was there a claim that the strength and conditioning component of this rehab was an issue. 0, none, nada. And so the DBs had some injuries that were season ending. Didn't have the same problem. Whole other position groups didn't have any injuries. The receivers had injuries, and half the room's gone. Deduce that.
Yeah, you know what? I talked about this on the video. Like, you know, perception is a powerful thing. You know, when it comes to players, and the truth is, like, it's possible that there were errors made along the way. It's possible that players weren't fully bought in. It's possible that there was a situation where maybe everything was going right, but you remember the worst case scenario. And also think it's important to maybe destigmatize a little bit guys going other places to get work. That's really not all that crazy, and I tried to cover that in the video, right? Ideally you want guys within your program to stay with the guys in your program, right? You don't want a bunch of outsiders with different opinions and ways of doing things. But if I remember right, you know, DeMarco Murray, even back when he played, he had some other outside guys he trained with and did some different things, did some like MMA cross training and did some other stuff to try and help his body that he thought worked for him. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with going to seek outside help, whether it's skill coaching, whether it's, just pliability, whether it's stretching, there can be a ton of different reasons. And I think you make a great point on some of the guys, and we've seen them, named in the chat. We got a very intelligent chat going on here, but some guys were bought in, fully committed. You look at a Burks who, to me, he's a guy who almost had kind of the toughest run of it because he had a good start to the year and then got injured, and you saw him try to work his way back into the fold, right? Try to work his way back into playing, and then he goes up to Missouri, catches that hit, and that kind of, certainly threw things, and it wasn't great. But at this point, I do think OU still has to work on fixing the perception. And I don't know necessarily how you go about doing that, because there does seem to be at least some perception amongst players incoming who maybe haven't talked to the right coach or who haven't maybe heard it themselves. There's some perception that things need to be fixed or things need to be addressed. And Gabe and even yourself made it sound like it's not perfect, but you've got to get your program full of guys who are willing to be bought into the way that you do things. And I think that was interesting in Burke's video that he posted, because Burks did his announcement. I don't know if you saw, he announced it through a video. He posted it to Twitter. It was really cool. He went into the office, talked with BV, Coach Jones. And one of the things BV said was how Burks got there and entrenched himself into their culture and became a Oklahoma guy and did things the way that they wanted them done. And then you see that in, getting onto the field. And it is an era at this point in college football where you're going to have players who are prima donnas. You're going to have players who think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread because they are garnering so much money on the NIL market. And things will eventually get fixed and resolved, and guys with minimal production will not garner the same value in the future. This is going to regulate itself eventually. Right now, you have very overinflated value of a lot of guys, and schools are trying to figure out how to navigate that, because you got guys being, we've talked about it. You gave a great example about Jackson, right? OU paying him 7 figures. And he's really a 6-figure level production player. And that is a big
Hey, can I say something?
Factor. Go ahead.
First, I want to say this. I think it's important, and probably if somebody soundbites this won't be added. I'm not saying Nick or Andrell are bad guys. I think they're both good guys. I think Nick made a wise decision. Nick's like Jackson to me. I think Nick made a wise decision based upon his experience, his brother's experience. He has an opportunity to play on Sundays. I have zero issue with him saying, I'm going to go try my luck someplace else. That makes sense. I also thought it made a ton of sense that if he has a history of separate issues and injuries, he probably does need someone who's going to give him more specialized attention. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm a guy who needs massages, who needs the Muay Thai, who needs the this, to this, to this. OU isn't necessarily giving me that. To me, that makes a ton of sense. So this is not to bash them. This is to provide context, especially when they are defaming the university in a way where they make it seem like there's systematic issue, when more it's anecdotal to their situation. And so I just want to make sure I say that because I think it's important to say for me, yeah, I was upset to hear that they were victims, right? The story that Gabe and Teddy told the first night made Nick a victim. He's not a victim. He has a special situation which causes for special attention. I respect that, but damn it, don't blame OU, right? So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, I heard just flat out 100% today. Dason McCullough is in the portal because he felt he was worth more than OU was willing to offer him. It's a business decision.
Yeah,
and interesting to hear. It really adds a layer of understanding of what's happening. And then I don't know if I watched the South Dakota State versus Incarnate Ward. Football was on today. I wanted to watch football.
There's a lot of good football on. Western Michigan was playing. They look pretty good. That's good stuff.
Something of note, during the broadcast, and if those of you guys that watched the game, you guys heard them say this, there's like 8 dudes at South Dakota State who were offered 6 figures of NIL and decided to stay. right? Business move, right? Those guys said, hey, it's more important to me to be a part of this program than to chase 50K or 100K or whatever it was over and beyond what they have. Well, that's an example of what's happening on one side of the coin. I think the other side of the coin is there's guys who are just saying, hey, dude, I may never even get to the league and have a chance to make $1 million. If the opportunity for me to say make 450 here versus 250 here affords itself to me, I got to take it. And it's part of the post that I made in OU Insiders. Like, that's the perception versus the reality. There is a community of players, especially at the OU level, where you're talking sometimes multiple 6 figures, 7 figures. In fact, Barry, you know my day job. I am an insurance and investments brokerage. All right, I broker agents and brokers all over America and teach them. I have an educational system to teach people that space. Coach Gates said, Mack, I need you to come talk to my kids and my parents. He said, I got a kid who's getting offered $1 million. I've got 4 or 5 kids who are getting offered multiple 6 figures. I got a couple of kids that are getting offered 100, 150, 200K in the next year or two. I need you to come and have conversations with my kids and their families because they're going to burn their money otherwise. And the point is, like, who are we to judge the individuals who, because they have a talent that garners them getting paid, aren't going to go chase the bigger opportunity? I'm not mad at Dason for saying, hey, dude, you know, what I heard is they were cutting into his NIL to make room for the quarterback's NIL. And I think availability, a history of injuries, plus a tweener. Is he a true backer? Is he an edge rusher? Is he a cheetah safety? Right? There's no true position for him.
And we saw, like, they liked Dolby at that position more.
They love him.
There you go.
They love him.
And you got to take care of Dolby because he's your 1A, and I don't even know if McCullough is a 1B as much as he is like a 2 or change of pace guy.
They love him. They love him. And he's going to come back better than ever. And he's a Sooner, unless something crazy happens. Sooner. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just a certain guy who's like, I'm a Sooner, you know, and those are the guys we want, especially if those guys are going to be big time players for us. And Dolby's a guy, in the way the game is played today, you need some guys who can play like a corner, cover like a corner, and hit like a weak side linebacker. And those are the attributes he brings to the table.
You know, Dolby's interesting, and maybe this, you know, gets cut up into a short. He is probably, and I want to get your take on this. This is just more like fun hypotheticals. To me, watching him play defense, he is the type of player who seems like you could have thrown him into any era of Bob Stoops' time, and he would have been a key cog in the defense. He would have been at least a 1A, 1B at a variety of positions. Just to talk about it from a skill set standpoint, I personally think of all of the DBs, if he gets his injury stuff right, take away maybe Eli Bowen and Gentry Williams, just because of Eli is just a very good football player, and Gentry has the measurables. Take them away, I think Dolby might play the longest in the league. I think Dolby has such savviness and flexibility at different positions that I think he's a guy who goes to the NFL the way it's played now, where you just have to be very good close area space. You have to be very good at seeing, analyzing, and closing distance. And he's one of the best at that. That's why he can not be as athletic as a Gentry, as explosive as a Peyton or a Billy. But, man, when it comes to closing the distance and accelerating, like him, Jaden Hardy, and Reggie Powers might be the 3 best. And, by the way, those are all guys who are coming back next year. And I think those guys have the best close area quickness of just closing the distance, getting from A to B, not long speed necessarily, but that A to B closing the distance of everybody. But I want your take on that. To me, Dolby strikes me as a guy who he could have played in 2000. He could have played in 07, 08, 09. He could have been on those teams, a valuable cog in the late Stoops era. He's just that type of player who's just physical and knows how to play where you put him.
I mean, he's a ball player. It's a term we use. It's a loosely used term, but there's a very analytical definition to it they understand the game. He's 100% a guy who could have played in the 70s. He's a guy who could have been on the 85 championship teams. He's a guy, he understands angles. He understands helmet and shoulder placement and tackling. And he understands, windows and things of that nature in terms of zone. When a guy can come up and force on a run play, cover the hole on a pass play, and read a quarterback's eyes, that's a guy who's going to give you a lot. From an athleticism standpoint, when you have to play a true two or man under with one or two DBs up top, that's where he can get picked on, right? So he's got, they put a Burks in the slot. They spread everybody out. You're in a single high because the quarterback is an athlete and you got to have another guy spying the quarterback. And now he's got to cover up the seam to the corner, to the post. That's one where you can run away from him and he'll have to improve. But yeah, he's a guy that you plug and play. You plug and play Adobe. You plug and play. The thing, it'll be fit and health. If the guy gets into the right scheme and can stay healthy, he's a guy who could play for a while, for sure.
Yeah, and which I will say from his injury, from what I've heard, he has an injury that, and guys, we'll talk about the Heisman a little bit. I just want to get D-Mac's thoughts here in a second. He had one of those injuries that I don't think is going to hamper him speed-wise when he comes back. I think he's going to be okay. I think he is going to be able to recover what he needs to recover. The only injury that really just melees guys right now from a speed perspective is a full ACL or Achilles rupture. That is like if you are a guy who relies on explosiveness and has to have it, if you fully rupture your Achilles, that is a tough injury. And I'll say also too, hamstring issues, which sometimes aren't as serious, but are just kind of nagging and they never fully get healed. It's a hard injury to get back from. There are ways to mitigate it, but sometimes when you have sort of either clean breaks or you don't have a major tendon rupture, right? Especially something in your foot in that scenario, right? If some of the soft tissue can still stay healthy, sometimes you can come back and be okay. And he strikes me as a guy who's going to be committed to getting better, committed to the rehab, committed to doing everything he can to get back on the field. And hopefully players like Gentry can make that jump and get back to the level of health. And then OU's got some young guys who we talked about it all year that look better athletically. They look more fit for the SEC than who was starting this year. One guy who I want to get your thoughts on this before we talk Heisman for just a little bit. Danny, of course, didn't win the Butkus Award, but now is going to go down as a legendary Sooner. D-Mac, he stayed in another year to be a part of OU's inaugural season in the SEC. He had a great year for a team that's a 500 football team. I think if OU is 9-3, Danny might win the Butkus this year. If OU is a 1 or 2 loss team, very strong chance with his personality, the games they would have played in, the value he would have had. But talk about what it means to have a guy come up like that in the program, and then now you're going to lose a guy like that just off of his time is just up. Eligibility has run out. There is no more time to play football. Talk about what a player like Danny, means to a team like Oklahoma, and then the value he added coming into this year as a senior.
Danny is a transcendent player, symbol, beacon for the university. I think something that makes me proud of him is I think he legitimately falls in line with the T. Marshall, the Rocky Kalmus, the Curtis Lofton. Like those guys were the A+++ guys. Then you had like the Lewis. What was my guy's name? 28 with the Sharks. Remember that? He was a stud.
Oh, yeah, that was Travis Lewis.
Travis,
yeah.
Like those guys are a cut under, right? Those guys, very, 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 very good. Corey Nelson, some of those guys who were really good BV backers, because like Travis Lewis is like one of the last of BV's backers. Corey Nelson, those are the last of BV's backers. But I think Danny cemented himself as one of the top dogs with the Teddy Lamans of the world. And again, The Rockies, the CeeLos, the El Mitches, the Torrance Marshalls, those championship caliber, Buckus-esque NFL dude backers. And from an intangible standpoint, you can't duplicate that. Or excuse me, not that you can't. It's very difficult to duplicate that. In other words, you can't expect the next backer who comes in and takes his position to have his impact in intangibles. He won the Herbie Award. Did you see that? He won the Herbie
did see
Award
that.
just because of right, like that.
Yep.
That's some cerebral stuff. Like what the
Yep.
things that he's done as a leader is important. But I do want to say this, and I don't know if this makes me a bad guy. Danny is not the most fundamentally sound backer. And, you know, I don't know that he's a first round draft pick. And I'm not saying that in any way to penalize him. What I'm saying is it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a drop off in production next year, assuming we have a backer that is also going to be a strong player. Kobe is a guy who I think comes in and provides quality depth, but Kobe has limitations, especially in the pass game, especially covering the flats. Running laterally, second half of the season, people put him in position to have to get to the sideline, and he couldn't get there. And so that's something he obviously will have opportunities to improve upon this offseason. But neither here or there. Danny's value was that of an all-conference caliber player. I don't want to take anything away from the fact that Danny's play on the field is an all-conference caliber play.
Yeah,
it is. But Danny is not the best middle linebacker in college football, which means someone else can come in and from a tangible standpoint, meet the guard in the hole, cross face on the fullback, get, what's my read on the double slant. Someone can come in and duplicate his, I don't want to say production in the sense, because Danny found a way to make a ton of tackles, but like his impact on like scoring defense, his impact on like third down efficiency, his impact on like, right, this play is going to be a make or break play. Can this guy go make the play? That's something that I feel there's opportunities there for OU to continue to at least keep what he brought to the table, or potentially get somebody, you get a real thumper who can run a little bit, and Kip can just be a will, like he's just a will. Yes. He's always covered up. He's always able to run sideline to sideline. It's almost impossible to reach him with a guard. Oh, that's trouble, right? And so, very good analogy, guys, is Rocky and T. Marshall, right? 98 season, Rocky's a freshman, and he's playing with B. Mo and Aaron Spence and some of these other guys. What's the freshman we had? We had a freshman for a year. He used to knock people out, and he transferred. Rocky's a good player. But T. Marshall comes in, and T. Marshall is an athlete, but a thumper. Now, Rocky's always covered up. Rocky could go be special. Rocky wins a Buckus because of T. Marshall and then because of Teddy. Because Rocky's attributes, his brain was so fast at diagnosing. If he could just get there, he's going to make the tackle.
100%.
The thing with Rocky was, if a guard can get on top of him, Rocky's 235, and his lower half was not as thick as T. Marshall's or Teddy's. Teddy and T. Marshall are like literally Roy. Even Roy probably had a bigger trunk than Rock. If you get your hands on Rock, you can cover him up, right? And so that's the thing, right? If we find a thumper who can say, "Hey man, B gap to B gap, I got QB run game, I got zone read, I got all that stuff going through the AB gap. Hey Kip, go kill the edges." We could have a very successful second level next year as well, especially if a guy like Dolby comes back and some of those freshmen continue to develop. Kanik is a no. Kanik is a no.
Kanik is no-go. No-go. But he's already transferring out. He's already announced he's in the portal.
Whoa.
Is he not?
No, don't be letting him catch you. He announced that he finished his finals, and he used it. Yes,
man.
Yes.
People be posting and sending me stuff. Man,
don't get caught up, bro.
Man.
Yeah, he was not in the game. He's not in the
Golly. Okay.
Yeah. See,
good stuff. I think that for me, the exact stuff that McKenzie is really good at, Carter needs to work on in the offseason. And I wish there were some attributes about Carter that you could just hand off to McKenzie in terms of that lateral explosiveness and quickness. If McKenzie is able to take this offseason, and if I were him and saying, let's analyze what you need to do, I would go find myself the absolute best speed guy in between that range where from the in betweens end of spring and then before you come back for summer, I would spend that time getting with the most premier speed guy you can find in your area, some guy who is just going to devote it to getting your feet strong and getting your lower half able to absorb force and put some pop into the ground. And even if he is able to improve himself 15%, 10 to 15%, it is going to be a market improvement because I already think reaction wise, he's good. He is strong. He doesn't need anybody necessarily changing his weight, changing his body a whole lot more. His physiology is solid. When I see him, I see a guy with weak hips, like the anterior part of his body. He's a guy who just doesn't get right. What makes good acceleration? It's the ability to cover ground in a short amount of time. And it's also the ability to flex your hips, right? You got to move, you got to raise the knee up in order to turn the feet over. And if you are slow hipped, right, quote unquote, or have weak hip flexors, weak psoas muscles, if you're just not able to light that sucker up in a very quick fashion, you're going to have a hard time being fast. So if I were McKenzie, and guys, this could be done. I do it for guys all the time. This can be accomplished in 4 to 6 weeks. You can see market improvement. If I were McKenzie, I would do nothing but that. For me, Carter has to just keep learning football. The athleticism, the overall skill set to me is there. He's maybe a smidge undersized, but not really in today's game. I wouldn't even say that. He packs such a serious punch behind his pads, and his explosiveness is so good that he can take on, if he has to take on a guard, he's going to be able to blast a tight end, no problem. Like, for me, Carter has to develop that. I did hear I would say the Boganowski comment that I saw floating up here is interesting. You know, if OU does struggle to find some depth there, do you think that's a place they can go? I want to say he's close to 215, maybe 220. Well, what do you think about that?
I think Boggs is a guy who could be a cheetah. Listen, so check me out. You've got Kip entrenched. You've got Kobe. You've got Lewis Carter. You've got Samuel. They've got one more.
Picciotti's left.
No, he's out of there.
Stutzman gone, of course. Who else are we missing?
Here's my point. Well, it was Desan. Desan left too. The point is this. The point is this. We play a 42 primarily. We play with two backers and a cheetah. And so we've got four guys who we have faith in. We're going to portal one, especially now that Desan has hit the portal. We're going to portal in a backer, and I bet you $5 it's a thumper. It's a guy who can challenge McKenzie at middle backer, but I also think what you say is exactly right. You know what Carter's going to do? Watch this. What was your biggest gripe with Kobe, his first year, between his first year and his second year? What was his biggest gripe? And then what did you notice immediately year two?
I mean, his feet were super slow.
You said he changed his body. He changed his feet.
Lewis
Carter's an 18-year-old kid. Next year, he will have gained 12 pounds of just grown man girth. He will have had another year in the weight room, which, by the way, he was like the second strongest backer this year. And he will have watched film all winter, all spring, all summer into fall camp. The trajectory for Carter is to be a guy who's a starter. The trajectory for Samuel is to be a guy who's a starter. I think we just need to recruit well this upcoming class. I think Boggs is a guy you want to have be that intimidating cheetah. If it were me, if I had, what I've seen on film, give me Dobie and Boggs. Small cheetah Dobie. When it's a run heavy down, give me Boggs coming off that C gap. That C gap is generally uncovered. If there's no tight end, he's free. You know what I mean? And so I like Boggs keeping depth at safety because we need some enforcers on the third level. We like to have 5'11", 206-pound safeties versus 6'2", 6'3", 217-pound safeties. Boggs gives us that range, that enforcer, have people thinking twice about catching the ball over the middle.
Yeah, that was the one thing about Dason. That's a really good point. Like I don't know if he had the
But
feet.
we forgot
What
about
was that?
Canic. It was Canic. I knew there was
What
something.
was Kanik? There you go.
Yeah.
Which to me, I just don't know. For Kanik to have an impact next year, which we'll see. In my opinion, he has to just to continue to develop the football skill stuff and just devote a bunch of time to watching film. You would hope a Danny Stutzman rubs off on him. And then here's a good example. One guy who really struggled his first 3 to 4 years of college was Curtis Bolton. And Sooner fans who have been fans of fans of the team for a long time, kind of know his story. Maybe Kinnick does have a career trajectory like a Curtis Bolton, right? Where the 3 to 4 years was very hard. He could hardly see the field. He was a talented athlete. He could really move his feet. He could do a lot of things, but he was bad at football. He just did not know how to play linebacker. And then that off season before his final year, what happens, D-Mac? The light bulb goes off, right? He is able to, the game seems to just slow down enough. He probably felt empowered in a room full of youth. I was listening to a study the other day, and they were talking about this. And you, as a principal, former principal, might understand or have some idea about this. But one of the things they found, and this study holds true, is that you will change the very makeup of a human being if you have, let's say you have a B student, right? But you put him in a class with nothing but C achievers. That B student is going to have a different esteem about himself. He's going to feel like the smartest man in the room. He might turn into a leader. He might be a guy who maybe is pressing forward a little harder to achieve his goals. You take that same B student, put him in a room of nothing but A plus super smart eggheads, and all of a sudden you have a guy who falls back, who maybe doesn't stand up, who isn't that leadership type. And you wonder if Kinnick sees a Stutzman leave, you got a McCullough leaving, some of these guys who were firmly ahead of you,
Yep.
who were a lot better than you. Now all of a sudden, the depth or the range in talent from the bottom end to the top end isn't as wide. And maybe that affects his personality. Maybe he goes into this season feeling like he has a chance to actually be a leader, to actually have an impact. He was a hell of a special teams player. And maybe a full year of that, of having to humble himself a little bit, learn the game, because we don't know what he's been doing in practice, because he didn't see the field a lot this year. But we don't know if he had one of those seasons where BV says, hey, you're shadowing Stutzman every practice. I want you to do what he does. When practice is over and Stutzman is hanging back doing his own stuff, I want to make sure that you are doing those exact things. You're not ready to play the game yet, but I think there is a chance for you in the future. To me, he could be having that season behind the scenes and we don't know. There's been receivers who have had that. There's been backers who have had that. There's been guys who have come out of nowhere. Another guy like LaColton Bester, his final year at Oklahoma, he was able to play, more significant snap. Like, there are plenty of examples of players who struggled years 1, 2, and 3, sometimes 4, and got it right on that 5th. So I want to ask you, DMAC, about the Heisman, and this is more just for the people to hear our takes on this. It was Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, Ashton Genty, and Dylan Gabriel. Seeing Gabriel's story up there, seeing what Oklahoma did for him, I think was cool to still see OU have an impact on the stage like that. Travis Hunter takes home the award. I personally, if it was my Heisman vote, it was him or Genty. I think they had the two most impactful seasons. For those poo-pooing Hunter winning the award, I would just argue maybe you didn't watch a whole lot of Colorado football, because he did some spectacular things this year. Almost every game, he was the best player on the field on offense and the best player on the field on defense. I think his future in the NFL It could be both, but he's a defensive player. He's a guy who totally deletes your A1 receiver. He has length, he has speed, he's physical, he's smart. He doesn't get into trouble. He's a high character guy. He's a guy who's not going to be a cancer to the team. He's a good leader. So talk a little bit, D-Mac, about just your initial thoughts. I think you could have given it to him. You could have given it to the Baylor back. And I did like the Baylor back. I don't know if you saw the photo that went viral, but he was the only player who wore the team issued up there in New York City. Everybody else had the threads on. Everybody else looked like they had a stylist whip something up. He just showed up there, team issued, wanting to rep Boise State. Now, not in the ceremony. Ceremony, he was decked out. But as they were going around town doing photos for the photo op, he was full team issued gear. Talk about the Heisman, D-Mac.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is the two-way players. I mean, bar none, Travis is the best of the two-way players that have come out that have been corners / return specialists, receivers. I mean, Travis was the best DB in the Big 12 and the best receiver at Colorado, which probably had the best receiving core in the Big 12. And so his talent, it speaks for itself. Impact plays speaks for himself. Games where he dominated on offense, dominated on defense. Then he played 400 more snaps than anybody else in college football. Played 400 more snaps than anybody else in college football. All that said, Genty's my Heisman. Kids. You're talking about the best player on the best team, right? I think that's why Dylan got invited, undefeated team, quarterback. You talk about, transcendent capabilities. You look at a player like Hunter, right? He's a generational talent. By the way, Cam Ward, a generational talent. Cam Ward's going to be an animal in the NFL. The kid's 100%. Tough as nails. But pure position, GT's better at his position than any of those other guys are at one singular position. GT's better at running back than Travis is at DB. And he's better at running back than Travis is as a receiver. He's just not better than Travis is at both in his impact.
Yeah.
Nobody's done what GT's done since Barry Sanders in 1989. Think about that.
Yeah. 2,500
yards. And they play a longer season now. And he's in but by the way, the Big Eight, I guess it was the Big Eight back then. I don't know. Yeah, it was the Big Eight in the 80s. There were 3 or 4 trash teams. You had games where, guys were going to get 350 yards. KU, Mizzou, Iowa State, those guys suck. Yeah. So there were games for the taking for guys like Barry to get 300 yards. Barry averaged like 270 a game, which is ridiculous. But people talking about Genty's schedule, he played against some good teams, man. He made it happen against Oregon. He made it happen against, UNLV. He went up against some teams and put up yards. But not only that, the eyeball test, the things he was able to do. He wasn't just running through gaping holes and a 10-2 guy. He's probably a 10-8, 10-900 meter guy, 4.49, 4.52, 40 guy. He's getting in and out of traffic. He's getting small. He's getting big. He's getting physical. He's got some wiggle to him. So if you ask me, I was okay with either. Travis just has 100%. Such a special year. I mean, think about it. Charles Woodson won it in a year where Charles Woodson had like 300 receiving yards. He had a couple of punt returns. He had, really good, 4 or 5 picks as a DB. He had the one-handed catch on the sideline and his helmet came off, and he puts the rose in his mouth to take them to the Rose Bowl and then again, of course, a share of the Natty. Charles Woodson was not as good, impactful of a player the year he won it than Travis was this year. Champ Bailey was not as impactful as Travis was this year. So I like the story. I think the thing that kind of sucks is I said this in August and people didn't believe me, but now people are starting to believe me. I said Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in America, and he didn't even get invited.
Crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
Didn't even get invited. And so
if Colorado was in the playoff, I think, and competing down the stretch, I mean, we saw how it went, right? It's Miami, that they were in the thick of it. You got Oregon, obviously #1 team in the country. Gabriel has a really cool story. All that stuff matters.
Can I say something about him?
Go ahead.
Somebody said Oregon's defense is going to cost them an Natty. Dillon Gabriel's going to cost them an Natty. You watch. Equal footing. They have a really good defense for the conference that they played in, but more so they have a really good offense for the Big Ten. That they overwhelmed the Big Ten. The Big Ten is pool guard, power football. Ohio State runs some junk and gets wide and has good athletes, but the Minnesotas of the world, the Marylands, the Rutgers, those guys can't compete at that level week in, week out. Oregon's going to get into a game where their defense is not going to be the best unit on the field. That's the thing. People don't recognize Oregon's defense was the best unit on the field like 9 out of their 12 games. And then in a couple other games, Oregon's offense was the best unit on the field. But you watch. They're going to get into games where Oregon's defense is not going to be able to dictate Oregon taking safe approaches. And now they're going to have to make some risks. You watch. It'll be interesting to see how Dillon Gabriel reacts in those when the bullets are flying. And if you're a Sooner fan, you know what I'm talking about, right? Salute to him for Texas. But God dang it, we don't need to lose that KU game. We don't need to lose that Okie State game. Those are games where we expect Dillon Gabriel to win us those games. Maybe this year they've kind of corrected some of the things that we saw as Sooners. But my pick, my thought process based upon what I've seen of him is a game's going to come where that defensive unit is going to not be able to overwhelm whoever's offense they're going against. And then Dillon is going to sense, oh, shit, it's on me. And that's the Dillon I want to see win the Natty.
Man, I'll tell you this. I think they need to hope Clemson is too much for Texas and Clemson beats Texas. Because I think if they have to play Texas, there will be points scored in that contest, and he's going to have to go win a football game. So I think with Clemson, they probably are 7 to 10 points better than them. Just Clemson has really struggled sometimes offensively this year to move the ball. Defensively, you make another good point. They have athletic guys in the secondary who are going to be able to close some airspace, and he's going to have to make big time throws. We've seen the games where he has had to make big time throws. He's done it but it's been Wisconsin, Penn State, against teams who don't have necessarily the same athletes in the back half of the defense that a Clemson or even a Texas is rolling out there, right? And I think Oregon, you have to admit it, they've put him in a great position to succeed. Will Stein's a great OC, one of the best in the game. They have put, and it's sad because I think you could have plugged a few different guys. I think if Jackson is up there running the same system, Jackson may not be 12-0. They'd be 10-2. I think Jackson has the skill set. If the system is right, if they're in a situation where they're working on the right things in practice, it's all just very, very important to just be keen on the details. And that's what Coach Lanning seems to do. And you're right about Shedeur. I completely agree. I've watched a ton of Colorado this year. They were on all the time. Colorado, to me, was one of the more entertaining teams to watch. And Shedeur, I will tell his mobility in the pocket, his ability to see the field, his ability to make throws that are very difficult look extremely easy. And to throw it accurately, man. He's a guy who gave his receivers a chance to be players. If he's on Oklahoma's team this year, even with the offensive issues, OU probably wins eight games. He's a kind of guy who is absolutely a game changer at the quarterback position. So, D-Mac, going to close out tonight. Do want to talk about OU's quarterback coach hire. Right, I'm not sure. I don't want to butcher the last name, but he is. We mentioned will Arbuckle bring in somebody to his staff, right? Somebody who can be a complement, know his system, and I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on on that? What are your thoughts on his ability to fill a role that's needed to be filled? And then maybe with Hawkins, right? OU, that you still want a Mateer, or you still want another guy in the portal. We've heard some other names get thrown around that OU fans might not be so excited about. Won't mention anything there, but Hawkins definitely going to be staying. So talk a little bit about that, man. OU just bringing in a player or a coach like that to coach the spot.
I looked him up yesterday when obviously they hired him. Really good coaching background. I like coaches who come up in places where they're not afforded a full cupboard full of talent, and they just kind of like are there to be present with. Being at Western Kentucky, being at Wazoo, having a hand in Cam Ward, and obviously being front and center with Mateer, and then having pedigree prior to at Western Kentucky. Those are places where you have to take an unfinished product and make it into something that's going to be successful. And I would even say Cam is a guy. No one thought Cam was going to be a baller until Cam was a baller. And Cam became a baller at Wazoo. Miami saw that and paid to have his services shipped to Miami, Florida. And so there's something to that. You know how I've stood since Tennessee. What I saw Hawkins do is something I never saw Jackson do in all of his time at quarterback. Even the Alabama game, very well strategically presented game plan, which Bama never adjusted to stopping. Wasn't so much as the Tennessee game where Hawkins was the actual linchpin, right? Hawkins was actually making the thing happen. And so Hawkins, I mean, by the way, true, like literally this time last year playing in the playoffs, August, September, I guess that was late September of this year, playing against Tennessee. What is his trajectory going to look like with a real coach? What is his trajectory going to look like with his canvas? He's 6'1.5". I've seen him. He's built like a running back. He's got long arms. He's got a stronger arm than Jackson Arnold, guys. He's got a quicker release than Jackson Arnold. He's got some archaic things he's got to correct. He does not have the presence. When I went to the Houston game and I'm on the field, Jackson did have that presence. He looked like the golden boy. Not just looked, he carried himself, right? And so I think Hawkins is that blue collar. Maybe I don't know if I'm as good as I know I should be kind of a guy, where Jackson's like, I think I'm a little better than I really am. What you want? You want the guy to be like, I'm the guy. I'm him. I think Hawkins was a guy who says, I hope I can be the guy. But that's the kind of canvas you want to instill confidence in. And then, of course, just like anything else, he needs comp. If we're hanging our hat on Hawkins, we're in trouble. We are in trouble. A true sophomore with a couple of good games and a stinker his first year. Does that sound familiar? Sounds like Jackson last year, right? So what do you call, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. I hope we don't just hang our hat on Hawkins. Hawkins needs to earn it. Salute to him for showing loyalty to the university, for making it very clear he wants to be a Sooner. I was a Hawkins guy after the Tennessee game. In my opinion, I would have given him more opportunities after the South Carolina game, because it just felt to me like a natural breakup was going to happen with Jackson regardless. You know what I mean? And so it'll be good to see him at the bowl game. It'll be good to see what we do. I like the new quarterback. I think he's going to do a great job. I'm not going to butcher his name. He's got a bunch of vowels and SRHs and stuff going on in there, some Ks and some Ts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Got to hear it said a couple times.
Exactly. I think he's going to work wonders. I think it's going to be a multiplier. I think there's going to be exponential improvement. I'm just telling you right now, Barry, it's not brain surgery. I guarantee you're going to see next season, first 3-4 games, the quarterbacks are put in situations where pre-snap, the read is easy and they throw where the defense isn't. I don't know what the scheme's going to look like exactly, but I do know there's some air raid principles in there. And I just know that's the easiest way to do the game. I went to the Dunk versus Crowley game today, and I'm sitting talking to Gates, and I'm like, hey, bro, we're having conversations. And D-Mac, bro, 2 safeties high, right? They're in a 42. We throw the opposite side of the overhang where they are. Single safety high, right? They're playing press. We throw the fade to the slots, right? They're playing off. We throw the hits. Like, it's the game. When you know how to play the game, there's a lot of principles to the game that are going to make it simple. And that's what a quarterback coach and a scheme like our book are going to present for us. We need to get Mateer. Malik Murphy's a guy that I would love to have.
Yes.
If we could get Malik Murphy, that would make me happy.
I've liked him for a long time, man.
Yeah, but no, good call. Like you said, I think there's value in him having someone in those meeting rooms that just knows him. There's a lot of alpha personalities in there. DMs or Murray is an alpha personality. Beating Bow's an alpha. Oh, you want to hear something else? This is just again crazy conversation. Sorry,
Let's
guys.
go, man.
I just want to give you guys information. And by the way, I want to make some enemies because people hate. Well, I think some people hate him, but I just got a vote of confidence for Beating Bow that I hadn't heard. Like probably the second best coach on the team, and the word on the street. Probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, but I'm gonna say it.
Say it.
The word on the street is that the offensive lineman did not want to pay attention to detail in the way and fashion that the way in which he has taught it for years. The guys coming in more recently don't have that same level of intensity or discipline. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of like, this is the standard. I'm not dropping the standard. And they're bucking. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of our younger, not freshmen, offensive linemen potentially leave. I hope I'm not the bearer of bad news, but I just heard that there probably are a couple of other guys that are not the true fresh. It's not EPL. It's not Ozeta. It's not Autry.
Not Akinkumi. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. But there are a couple other guys. But it was kind of just eerie and interesting to hear. I'm having a conversation, and the individual that I spoke to is in coaching circles with OU, our competitors, and some other places. And this is what I was told is happening in coaching circles. Todd Bates is the best assistant coach on the staff, and Beaton Bow is probably the second best assistant coach on the staff. Todd Bates can be top 3 in this position group all across the country. Beaton Bow's top 5.
Man, but when we had that conversation offline, and I'll say this, I talked with somebody who may or may not be a player or current player, but Beaton Bow has, and it was kind of in this vein, going to him with some information. Beaton Bow has a way that he coaches that is very high level. There's a lot of detail in the coaching, and this really applies to all position, but when it comes to offensive line, where it is so much about reps and continuity, what you do in practice is learn what you've got to do. It is on you to go out there and make sure you're getting enough individualized work yourself and practice the things you are learning in practice, because practice does not give you enough reps. You will not get enough reps in the few hours of practice to be great at the position. You have to go out and do work yourself, work as a group. You have to do stuff before practice, after practice. And I will say there are a group of guys within the team who are the younger guys who fans could probably maybe guess a few of them who do feel that way, who know that work has to be done, because I'll say it, they came from programs in high school where that was just the expectation, right? That's the benefit when you are able to go get, Jinx guys back when Trimble was coaching. Jinx players, all of the starters, DMAC, any given year, they're hanging back after practice. It was to work extra stuff. There might be, high school is different with the rules and stuff. They might have 1 or 2 coaches hanging back to throw balls, that whatever, right? You had guys doing work, additional work every single day. And that is important on the offensive line when it is a rep game, right? You have to have the reps of doing the thing. So there has to be buy-in. So, I think that's wonderful to hear. I think Beaton Bow he has a chance to be successful this upcoming year if the right guys are able to gel. He's not going to have the luxury. We saw it this year, not going to have the luxury of 5 to 6 games in getting it right. So you got to have the players in line from the jump. But some of that is on the players. Some of that is on them making the decision to be great. And it sounds like some of the younger guys You know, we'll see if anybody transfers out. I know we've heard rumblings of Eugene Brooks, heard some rumblings of some guys on the defensive side. You know, we'll see what happens. But OU has some players who we talked about it. We think they are the more talented offensive linemen coming up. I think Akinkumi has a chance to be, he has flexibility. I think he can be an elite guard. He, to me, is an NFL level guard in the next 2 to 3 years. You could even flex him at tackle because he has the length. I think he's a guy who is your starting guard. Maybe he's your second string right tackle in a pinch, but he has a ton of flexibility. But I think that's a great point, man. You have to, whatever position you play, you have to go out there and get the extra work for yourself and have the buy-in to do the additional reps. And that's valuable. D-Mac, closing thoughts before we bounce out of here tonight, man.
Number one, North Crowley versus Duncanville game, and I had sideline passes. It was such a fun game to be at. Again, a guy who I came up with coaching. I think he was just the D tackle coach when we were at Cedar Hill together. He's now the head ball coach at Crowley. Shout out to Ray Gates. I took tons of pictures and videos. That was a fun experience. I think it's also important. We talked about early on in the pod. I am biased. I am a Sooner. I am an alumni. But when I get more information, I want to make sure we are able to address the injury issues that were brought to our attention the last couple of weeks. And you know, sometimes players have a very macro, message where everyone's hearing it on all these platforms, but in reality, it's a very anecdotal experience. And we brought up the example of, we had 2 DBs have season-ending injuries, and one of them has had a recurring injury that we all know about, and that guy is still to this day a Sooner, and he's not blaming everybody under the moon. And then, of course, we had a couple of receivers have season-ending injuries, and those guys are blaming everybody under the moon. When I get more direct information from people who tell me, Mackie, this is what happened, that's what happened, this was a choice that they made, this was an option that they had, and this is the direction that they chose to go, I'm not going to let you defame my university. When I get that information, I'm going to publicly put that out. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean I poo-poo you, but you don't get to talk shit about our school. When the school gave you the options, you took the options that were best for you. And so I think that's also very important to say. And then last but not least, for the portal, okay, guys, there's 3 communities in the portal, and we have to understand these 3 communities and why everything is happening the way they're happening. 30 seconds, and I'll just kind of flush through this one. Community number 1 are the individuals who on your team have outpaced what they've earned, and they're going to go seeking more money. And in this landscape and era of college football we are in today, we can't get mad at that. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We totally can.
It does suck. It's reality.
We
right?
can.
Dave Jackson is going to demand a lot of coins.
We can.
After the
We
season
can.
he had.
But we have to understand the nature of what the business is. It's economics. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so these guys, and then there's another community. Community number 2 is the community of individuals who are no longer either worth what we paid the year prior, or are guys we figured out are not OU good. And they are being invited out because, like, understand every starter, every scholarship guy gets $50K right off the bat. You don't want that $50,000 going towards your $20 million budget on a guy who can't help you if there's another guy for $50K can help you, right? So that second community of players, those individuals are guys that, some of the, I'd say 25 to 30% of the players OU has put into the portal, probably more, are guys who simply aren't OU good. They're not going to help the school. And I'm going to use Kanik as an example just because this might be the case. But Kanik might be the guy who's going to kill it on special teams, going to add quality depth as a second teamer because he's a 4-year guy and he loves the university. I believe at a school like OU, they're not going to get rid of that guy. But if there's a kid who's hot dogging it, he's missing nutrition, he's late on his times, he's not hitting his weights, and he's a second teamer, and he complains a little bit, that guy might get asked, hey, dude, we think it's best you hit the portal. So community number 2 is going to be the addition by subtraction community. Some of your favorite players, or some of the players who came in highly recruited. Oh, that was a 4-star from Melissa, Texas. Or that was a 5-star from Oregon, California, whatever. Those guys, we find out in a year they can't help the team, right? I think those are the guys that are going to get portaled out as well. And then there's community number 3, which is OU is experiencing it for the first time ever, which is the 125 to 105. There are guys, and the example I use on OU Insider this is my own opinion, but I think guys like Dayson's a guy you want to keep at OU. He's a baller. He can help you. There's a lot of things he does well. But when you cut 125 scholarships to 105 scholarships, and you can no longer hold 15 receivers, right? You can only hold 11, and you can no longer hold 11 backers. You can only hold 8 or 9, and a guy like Boggs has to learn both. You have to ask yourself, do we have $300K to pay a guy like Dayson, where he doesn't have a true position? He's not an edge guy all the time. He's not a true second level backer all the time. And he's definitely not a true cheetah all the time, right? That 125 to 105 has absolutely had an impact. I wrote an article about it on OU Insider where I literally met with the Tennessee brass. And this is the logistic guys, not even just the coaches. I had the opportunity, Hype let me meet with his crew, right? And they were discussing how the 125 to 105 is going to impact everybody. And we're feeling it for the first time, so we don't understand why are all these guys leaving. Some of them are leaving simply because we don't have 20 scholarships to give. And yes, some of those are going to be preferred walk-ons, but some of those are going to be scholarship guys. And so unprecedented times. Our coach, I feel like, this is Mackey's feeling, I feel like he has based upon things that I'm hearing, he has the right approach and temperament on what to do. They've got enough money to get the guys they need. We have enough money, guys. OU doesn't want to bid. OU doesn't want to pay for the first batch while the best players in America are getting ready and geared up to play in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But he's got to produce. BV, love you to death. The person I talked to today said, Mackey, I love BV. I want to see OU win. But we all know the pressure today. Like, coach, you may not be coach no more of OU if this season it doesn't all come together. And so, we're all rooting for. I am selfishly, biasly, with a positive prejudice. I prejudge my school in a positive light. I want to see us be successful.
Man, I think if you just simplify it down to this, defensively, OU had a group of players who could go on that side of the ball and be a 9 to 10 win, fringe 11 win defense for any team. You put them on any other team with a good offense this year, that defense that OU rolled out there, that Ali and BV were coaching, led by Danny Stutzman and Jaden Jackson and Eli Bowen, you put that defense on any team with a good offense, and they are the 9 to 10 win range. So just to oversimplify it, if they can get this offense next year to a top 30 unit, I think they have a chance to really win and compete. And we saw it this year, man. If they are a 9-win team, you're going to be right on the fringe, right on the cusp of that playoff discussion being in the SEC. That's scheduled next year. It gets no harder. But, man, you go out and you kick some ass against even a lowly Michigan team right off the jump. That game, D-Mac, might be, I'm going to call it now, that might be the most important game of Venable's career right now, is that second game. I think it's second game of the year. They played Michigan in Norman.
You know what's crazy? You ready?
What?
You ready? You want the proof? You want proof of concept?
Yeah.
Texas rode that win all fucking season. Excuse me for cussing.
Great point.
Texas rode that win all mother sucking, didn't cuss, season.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for OU right now, they got to mark that one down, man. That is going – you don't have the luxury of waiting. Michigan is going to roll out some big-time athletes. That's a team that just beat Ohio State. They didn't have the year they want. You don't have Harbaugh, but you still have OU representation at the coach position. Like, there's a lot of cool underlying stories. It'll be a fun game. I'm going to try to be at that one to open the season. But I think for BV, that game might decide the year. I mean, you go out and lose that game and lose it convincingly, it's going to be really tough sledding for the rest of the season. But I think OU has a chance, at the end of the day, if they can just get the offense not slightly more than serviceable, and then improve that sucker through the year and develop some elite guys catching the ball and running the ball, then Venables can have a top season. But man, want to thank everybody for hopping on. Went a little longer tonight, but we had a lot to catch up on. Sooner Nation, make sure to go over to OU Insider, OUinsider.com. Grab yourself a freaking membership. There is some great discussion on there. D-Mac posted his thoughts. I believe it was perception versus reality. Guys, go check that out. I've been chiming in a bunch on individual threads. Going to do some off-season stuff, just talking about what some of these new guys are going to bring to the table, who are guys who were value players this year who maybe went a little bit unnoticed, right? Gonna chime in on that. But go grab yourself a membership. If you are looking for the best info, right? When I say best info, not those folks out there who are throwing darts at the wall and just hoping something sticks. And me and D-Mac are not the insiders. We're not getting scoops. We're not the guys trying to do all that. We are analyzing the game and providing our commentary, our feedback on what we see. Occasionally we hear a thing or two, but that's not our job. Our job is just to get on here and try and entertain you folks with football discussion. If you want, maybe start some interesting dialogue. If you guys want the goods, Jesse, Parker, Brandon, Brian, the whole team on that site does a phenomenal job. The board is well run. Brandon and Parker are active on the board, very heavy. So I just want to appreciate everybody for hopping on tonight. Make sure to go follow us on Instagram. Find me at BWise Fitness, letter BWISE Fitness. Damien is Dame That Dude. And on X, where it's all football, right? Because on Instagram, I'm doing the fitness stuff. I'm doing the training stuff. D-Mac's doing the urban entrepreneur, and he's got all the business stuff going on, man. If you want just football, go over to X at D_Mac13. Find me at BWise Fitness, letter BWISE Fitness. Sooner Nation, want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Getting late, but we will see you soon.